Welcome everybody to the Spandex annual Best Games of the Year video. This one is coming out a little bit late. There were a lot of games to play and I tried to play as many as I could. Side note, some of the video footage I'm putting into this video is from the trailers, are from trailers. There were two reasons I did this. Number one, I did not archive all the games that I played this year. And number two, the games that I did archive, a lot of times were end game footage, or at least spoilers. So, and that's another thing I want to mention real quick in this video, is that I'm going to avoid spoilers big time. Thank you guys. Hope you enjoy. Make sure to subscribe and check me out on Twitch. Same name, 2X's. So with that, enjoy! Alright, number 10 game of the year is actually Neon White. What? Let's start this list on a bit of a downer. Neon White is the first game ever to make me dizzy and slightly nauseous, and I've played a lot of games over 30 plus years. Thankfully, it doesn't happen for at least 2 hours in, and it's not overwhelming. The game moves at a blistering pace as you almost float forward collecting card abilities. Activate these abilities as quickly as they come to fly through the levels littered with platforms and enemies. Levels often last less than a minute as you slice, jump, fire, bounce, glide, and dash in a stream of consciousness. Not thinking, just reacting. Then a puzzle forms as you return to your best score, finding shortcuts and surprising tricks that always satisfies. I've never related so hard to speedrunners as I do when experiencing Neon White, and that's what it is, an experience, a roller coaster of quick thinking button presses that everyone should try. Just do your best to ignore the absolutely, albeit intentionally, obnoxious dialogue. First game to make me nauseous, first game to inflict upon me actual physical pain just from listening to characters talk. Eat your heart out, stranger of paradise. Number 9, Cursed to Golf. I love golf games, both sim and arcade. Cursed to Golf is unashamedly in the latter category, but keeps the experience fresh by making it a roguelite with an actually decent story. Though let's face it, it's no golf story. But then again, what is? That game rules. You gain a bevy of consumable abilities, allowing an almost puzzle-like approach to each very long hole, while balancing when to risk saving powerful shots versus the fear of failure. Unfortunately, I encountered a lot of bugs, some of which were hard crashes. It only saves after each hole, no mid-hole checkpoints, and considering how involved they can get, this could be a big problem. That's a major bummer, man, but I can't deny how much enjoyment I consistently got when nailing a crazy trick shot like an absolute golf legend. Whether you hate the sport or not, I highly recommend Cursed to Golf. Number 8, Triangle Strategy. Of all the games on this list, Triangle Strategy is the one I probably played the least, but it's not for lack of quality or enjoyment. As a tactics lover and a big fan of Octopath Traveler, Triangle Strategy was a no-brainer. Incredibly deep combat mechanics and RPG customization. This homage to Final Fantasy Tactics in particular nails the satisfying complexity of the genre. My main issue is the unnecessarily verbose writing, voiced by questionably cheesy, over-the-top characters.
Are you impressed? And humble as well. And humble as well. And humble as well. Are you impressed? And humble as well.
But ultimately, the combat and progression does enough heavy lifting to carry Triangle Strategy onto this list. And, like some games that may be coming up later on in this list, choices will shape the story and scenarios you encounter. Tactics fans should not sleep on this one. Number 7, the highly underrated Infernax. Indie games often ape 16-bit games, especially with art direction, but rarely does the 8-bit style get so much love and accuracy, especially in regards to Castlevania 2 and Zelda 2. Those games are underrated and deserve some modern indie love. Infernax feels simultaneously old and new. Retro nostalgia notwithstanding, Infernax manages to subvert expectations through player choice and consequence with myriad story branches and endings. This is a game I really don't want to spoil. Just know that there is more than meets the eye in this 8/16-bit throwback. Gorgeous sprites, simple but addicting gameplay, challenging but fair, blood-spilled cutscenes, Infernax for me came out of nowhere and was a delightful surprise. I may have never played this game, but thanks to Game Pass, I got to discover yet another underrated gem. And yes, there is wall chicken. Perhaps another shocking pick to make my list especially this high, number 6, Vampire Survivors. Well, I typically like mechanically dense games. Clickers elicit nigh zero interest for me. And yet, Vampire Survivors can be inexplicably addicting. You press 0 buttons, just movement. Attacks are relegated to automatic cooldown cycles. Move the left stick, don't die. That's it. So in a way, it's the opposite of a clicker and more of a mover. But building your character, of which there are many options in each run in this roguelike, gets extremely satisfying, especially as you evolve into an absolute murder machine Chad. The action is fast, the sound and music always welcome, and the sheer number of ability combinations all work in tandem to create an experience that is simultaneously relaxing and chaotic. At just a few bucks, or free with Game Pass, Vampire Survivors ends up being a must-play for all types of gamers. And now for a less shocking plot twist, number 5, the absolutely adorbs Tinykin. Tinykin, at least for me, came out of nowhere. You control a little guy in a big world, solving puzzles while exploring everyday rooms in an everyday home. Obvious Pikmin comparisons are obvious, but there's so much more going on here. It's Pikmin meets open-ish world collectathon a la Mario Odyssey, sprinkled with It Takes Two. I'm not huge on character and NPC models. For me, they clash a bit with the environmental art, but there's no denying the not overly cutesy two-dimensional art style, reminiscent of Paper Mario. Great sound, great music, and slightly challenging at times puzzles makes Tinykin a really special game. And like the aforementioned Vampire Survivors and Infernax, it's also on Game Pass. Have I mentioned how incredible Game Pass is? You're probably not shocked this made my list, but Mario plus Rabbids, Sparks of Hope. Yeah, I've been a huge tactics fan my whole life. Ogre Battle, Final Fantasy Tactics, XCOM, I love the genre. Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope continues a tradition of the prior game, focusing on fun mobility, combo chains, and a wacky vibe that mostly lands. Yeah, the rabbits are never really that funny, but here they are at least somewhat charming, and at the very least, not too obnoxious. Obviously inspired by Mario Galaxy with Star Bits and Luma Rabbids, this is a great entry into the tactics genre. And if you like a challenge, as I do, hard mode sliders are perfectly balanced. I was mostly successful in battles, but the Sword of Damocles always loomed just above. It looks great, runs smooth, and has delightful animations throughout. You know, it's the small touches that can really elevate a game, making it feel distinct amongst a crowded field of top-tier titles. Plus, it's got one of my all-time favorite voice acting interpretations of Mario, in the Lou Albano-inspired tones of a swole Mario Rabbid. Yeah, I wrote that and said it. Sir, that's very rude. He didn't even attack me. He just wants to. Is that your kink, Giant Goomba? Are you like Lady D? It's perhaps one of the best games in the subgenre. It's number 3 on my top 10 list, The Quarry. Story-driven games typically don't interest me. Gameplay is what really drives me forward. And yet, I have a deep fondness for games like The Quarry. Perhaps it harkens back to my love of choose-your-own-adventure books. Either way, I love them. The Quarry is yet another horror adventure by Supermassive Games, makers of Until Dawn and the Dark Pictures anthology. The Quarry is, in my opinion, one of the best games in this subgenre, perhaps the best. For the uninitiated, you play as a cast of characters, make all sorts of choices to change story outcomes, and find secrets to help piece together potential mysteries and ultimately increase chances of survival. Because yes, your characters can and likely will die. That's always been the big hook for the developer. I adore these games, but there's no doubt that Supermassive can be hit or miss. The Quarry is an absolute banger, and a must-play for the genre curious. She's still just hair.
You had those motherfucking counselors.
This breaks the immersion. Oh boy, does this game rule. It's my number 2 game of the year. It is God of War Ragnarok. Boy. The God of War franchise is among the video game elites, and mostly holds up, obvious cringe notwithstanding. But it needed a reimagining, and the 2018 game became the quintessential reboot. It was exactly what you'd expect and hope for, and so much more. A generational game that managed the Herculean task of besting Red Dead Redemption 2 for Game of the Year at the Game Awards. Although I put it at number 2 behind the criminally underrated Into the Breach. God of War Ragnarok is absolutely top-tier storytelling and weighty, satisfying combat. It is the complete package, though. Interesting and at times surprising side quests, stellar writing, and absolutely inspired voice acting. Richard Schiff is cast as Odin. Richard freaking Schiff. He is not someone you think of as a godly, intimidating powerhouse. But as someone who considers The West Wing to be among the greatest, if not the greatest TV drama of all time, I am so here for it. Look, it's hard to talk about this game without getting into at least some spoilers, so let me just say God of War Ragnarok excels at nearly everything it sets out to do. Despite not quite having the wow factor that the prior title had, it hammers home the notion that the God of War franchise stands amongst the gaming gods. Get it? Hammer? Gaming gods? Okay. I tried to think of ways to not have this as my game of the year for 2022. I tried, but you know what? There's simply no denying that Elden Ring is my 2022 game of the year, probably the best game of the year, and one of the best games of all time. I know what you're thinking. Of course Captain Spandex puts a Souls-type game as his goatee. How predictable. But you would be hard-pressed to find someone who wouldn't at least consider Elden Ring as the most well-made game of 2022. The level of detail, the sheer size of interesting content, the beautifully haunting music, and rock-solid controller-squeezing combat are all just objectively a step above most games. If you've never played a Souls game, Elden Ring is a perfect entry point. Taking the subgenre formula and setting it in an open world was a risky bet that I admit had me a bit skeptical. But it works flawlessly, especially for first-timers. Yes, the legacy dungeon crawling adventures of past entries remain. However, getting stuck and frustrated by a boss or area is wholly remedied by the fact that you can just go somewhere else. There's almost always somewhere else to go, and that somewhere else is almost always engaging. Not being funneled into a critical path choke point is a godsend for new and returning players alike. There are definitely repeated bosses and encounters, but these are buttressed by a staggering amount of unique and interesting content. Hundreds of hours of exploring and battling in a massive open world, with at least in my playthrough very few bugs, is a testament to Elden Ring's polish. The list of games throughout history that can make this claim are few and far between. Not only is Elden Ring easily my game of the year, it just may be in a future discussion of the greatest games of all time. And time will tell. I'm not afraid of falling. What? What?
I'm a banana! I'm a banana!
Damn it.
I'm a banana! I'm a banana!
And that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Definitely leave some comments down and tell me what you thought of my choices. Agree, disagree, and what games would you have put on this list that's not on there or that you agree with? I'm really curious. A couple games that I should mention here. A little bit of honorable shout outs or games that I did not get to play. Number one is Tunic. Tunic, everything I saw and heard about this game for years, I thought I would really love this game. It looked a lot like Fez / Zelda, and Fez is one of my favorite indie games ever. certainly was for a long time. Probably Hades or Into the Breach now have overtaken that, but still, Fez is excellent. Didn't get to play Callisto Protocol. I would have squeezed it in before the end of the year, but the reviews have been a little middling. As much as I love Dead Space, I'm gonna play it eventually, but I'm a little worried about that. Didn't play Bayonetta 3. That's probably the biggest one this year that I didn't play that would almost certainly make my Game of the Year list. I absolutely adored Bayonetta 2, especially the Bayonetta games, and I am super hyped to play this one. So that's going to be one that probably would have made the list. Sorry, Bayo. Two other quick shout-outs I want to make. Well, technically 3. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles had a great year this year. They had the collection, and they had Shredder's Revenge. Both excellent games. And then Signalis. Signalis is not a game that a lot of people have talked about, I feel like. Highly recommend it. It's on Game Pass, because Game Pass rules. So, yeah, check that one out. And thank you guys again. Make sure to comment and let me know what you think. Make sure to sub. Check me out on Twitch. See you guys. Tinykin, at least for me, came out of nowhere. You control a little guy in a big world solving puzzles. Tinykin, at least for me, came out of nowhere. You control a little guy in a big world solving puzzles. Puzzles?